Okay, so today we're going to talk about dividing complex numbers. And we need to take note of what it says right here. I cannot be in the denominator of a complex number, okay? So the way we're going to do this, how we're going to get the I out of the denominator, is we're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by I. So I'm going to do an example with you. I'll do number 2. I cannot be in the denominator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply both the denominator by I and the numerator by I. And let's see what I get. 4 times I is 4I. Negative 9I times I is negative 9I squared. Now we have to remember that I squared is equal to negative 1. Do we remember that? Okay. So I'm going to rewrite this as 4I over negative 9 times negative 1, because I squared is negative 1. Okay? And then let's simplify this further. I'll have 4I in the numerator. Negative 9 times negative 1 is 9. So this is my answer. If you can simplify the fraction, be sure to simplify the fraction. Okay?
So for number 1, then when you simplify it, it's 10I over negative 2. How would you simplify that?
It would be negative 5.
Negative 5I.
Let's do number 2. So if I multiply this by I and the denominator by I, I'll get 10I over 2I squared. This would be 10I over 2 times negative 1. So this is 10I over negative 2. What's 10 divided by negative 2? So it would be negative 5I. Okay, so that is a dividing with complex numbers. Let's look at a more difficult case. So let me look at this one over here. We are going to do the complex conjugate. This time, guys, we have a binomial denominator. We have a real part and an imaginary part. So guys, whenever you have a binomial, bi means 2. We're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate. And guys, if you remember from the last lesson, a conjugate, let me show you what a conjugate is. If I have 6 plus 3I, the conjugate would be 6 minus 3I. The real part stays the same. The imaginary part, the sign changes. That's what a conjugate is, okay? So that's what we're going to multiply. So if I do number 8, actually, I'm not going to do number 8. I'm going to do a harder one. I'm going to do number 16. I'm going to multiply both the numerator and denominator by the conjugate. So guys, remember, when we multiply by the conjugate, the real part stays the same. So negative 4 will stay the same. The complex part will become positive. And we're going to multiply this by both the numerator and the denominator. So we're multiplying by the conjugate. Okay, so basically the conjugate, you do the opposite sign. Let's look back at the notes. It says multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate of the denominator. Okay, so the conjugate of the denominator is negative 4 plus 3I. Now we're just going to multiply. So negative 8 times negative 4 is 32. Negative 8 times 3I is negative 24I. Now I'm going to do the next number. Negative 4 times negative 4, negative 4I times negative 4 is positive 16I. Negative 4I times 3I is negative 12I squared. So that is my numerator multiplied out. Okay, next let's do the denominator. Negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. Negative 4 times 3I is negative 12I. And my next part, negative 3I times negative 4 is positive 12I. Negative 3I times 3I is negative 9I squared. Okay. Now we're going to just simplify some things. Do you see that these cancel? Okay. Let's combine the middle term. What is negative 24i plus 16i? Negative 8i. Negative 24 plus 16 is negative 8. And then minus 12. But guys, what is I squared again? Negative 1. Okay, so that's my numerator. And the denominator, I have 16 minus 9, and I squared is just negative 1. Okay, let's simplify a little bit further. I have negative 12 times negative 1. What's that? A positive 12. So I'm just going to erase this and put a positive 12. Yep, negative 9 times negative 1 will make a positive 9. So I'll just make this positive. Okay, so now we're just going to combine the real parts and the imaginary parts. 32, oops. Let me highlight it. Okay, 32 plus 12. We're going to add those together. So we get 44. 44 minus 8i. Let me get my colors right. 44 minus 8i over 16 plus 9 is 25. So this is my final answer. And notice I is not in the denominator. Okay, because I cannot be in the denominator. So the way we got I out of the denominator is we multiplied by the complex conjugate. Okay. All right. Do you guys need me to do another one with you? Yes. Okay. Do you want me to do 15 or I think y'all can do 15 because that was very similar to 16. I'll do this one. I'll do number 8. So guys, what is the complex conjugate of the denominator here? Six minus 2i would be the complex conjugate. Because look at our notes. It says multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate of the denominator. So this is the conjugate of the denominator, and I'm going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by it. Okay, so now let's multiply it out. Okay, so 5i times 6 is 30i. 5i times negative 2i is negative 10i squared. I times I is I squared. Then the denominator, 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times negative 2i is negative 12i. I'll use a different color. 2i times 6 is 12i. 2i times negative 2i is negative 4i squared. And we're going to simplify all of this. So my numerator, I have 30i minus 10. And what is I squared? Negative 1. So guys, that's what we have to remember. I squared is negative 1. So I replace this I squared with a negative 1. So that's my numerator. Let's talk about the denominator. Negative 12i plus 12i is just 0. So I can just cross that out. So I have 36 minus 4, and I squared is negative 1. Okay, so this will simplify to 30i, negative 10, and negative 1. This will be a positive 10. 36, negative 4, and a negative 1. This will be a positive 4. So in the denominator, I have 40. Now, normally the format the real number part comes first and the imaginary part comes second. So I'm gonna write it like this. Okay, what number can all three of these be divided by? 10. This, I didn't mean to. The 10, the 30, and the 40, all three of these numbers can be divided by 10. So I'm gonna write this as, I'm gonna write it over here. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 30 divided by 10 is 3. 40 divided by 10 is 4. So this is what it would simplify to. 1 plus 3i divided by 4. I chose a number that all three can be divided by. And that's how you simplify it. Okay? The previous question that we did, these numbers could not all be divided by the same thing. So I just left it like it was. But this one right here, they could all be divided by the same number. So we could simplify. Okay? Any questions, guys?
Number 4, or the one, I guess 4, 5, and 6, when you just multiply,
By I.
just by I.
Yes. On this page, you would just multiply by I. Whenever I is in the denominator, you just multiply top and bottom by I. If you have a binomial, like these cases, you multiply by the conjugate. Any other questions, guys? All right. I'll be walking around if you need help.